Howdy folks, and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles. I hope you all had a good weekend. Now forget it because it's Monday. It's been a pretty good week. We actually, well, I say we, Rita couldn't make it, but I went up to a local cat breeder to have a look at the kitten that we're going to get. And in fact, I took some video. One of those little bundles of joy is going to be mine. We're getting one of the girls. They're 5 weeks old at the moment, but you can get an idea of what they'll be like when they're fully grown. That's their mother sitting on top of the box. Well, I say fully grown. Maine Coons take anything between 3 to 5 years to actually reach adult size. These are some of the other cats that the breeder had. Mostly Maine Coons, but there were a couple of ragdolls in there as well. As you can see, I actually remembered to turn the phone the right way around for this clip. And I put these videos up on Facebook last week and everybody went nuts. Easily 2 of my most popular Facebook posts, well, ever. Everybody was posting pictures of their cats in replies, which was great. The reason, to address one of the concerns that was raised, the reason we went to a breeder and not to the local cat shelter, we already have 2 rescue cats. Both Crystalline and Chewbacca were from cat shelters. Crystal in particular was horribly abused when she was a kitten. And we wanted another kitten this time around because I've never had a kitten. Don't forget, I first met Crystalline and Juicy when they were adult cats. And our local cat shelter didn't have any kittens. So we went with the breeder, and I've always wanted a Maine Coon anyway, so 2 dreams realised for the price of 1. I got a baby Maine Coon kitten. At the moment they're 5 weeks old, and they're going to be old enough to leave their mother on the 21st of April, and that's the day we're going up to collect them. I was very impressed with the breeder, by the way, because you hear all kinds of horror stories about, well, not just cat breeders, but breeders in general, where they basically just turn their animals into baby factories. That's not what happens with this breeder. Each of the female cats has 1 litter per year, so they basically get 9 months off a year to just, be a cat. So, very impressed with the breeder. The cats were absolutely gorgeous, and so friendly. I mean, that's kind of typical of the Maine Coon breed anyway, but even the males, they were just, oh look, new person, sniff sniff, lick lick. So yeah, looking forward to that. The only thing that really remains at this point is what I'm going to call her, and there have been a few suggestions, and no, I'm not going to call her Dave, although you never know, if I ever forget what her name is, I might. But I went through a bunch of options. I mean, I'd basically think of one name and I think, yeah, that's it. That's what we're going to call her. And then a couple of days later, I'd think of another one. I think, oh, that's a much better name. And for the moment, I'd settled on calling her Akizuki, after the Japanese Tier 8 destroyer in World of Warships. What? What's wrong with that? Hey, it could have been a lot worse. I could have called her Yamato. I don't know. Akizuki's just a cute name. And you could always abbreviate it and just call her Zuki or Aki or whatever, It doesn't really matter. She's a cat. She's not going to care. Akizuki, come here, come back, Akizuki. Oh, great, she's off. Cats don't do what you tell them to do. Well, actually, Juicy does. She's more like a dog than a cat. See, I've mentioned her name now, and she's on top of the cat tree next to my computer desk, and her tail's starting to switch backwards and forwards, but she knows I'm talking about her. She's a great cat, but I'm looking forward to the new one. Anyway, enough about cats. So, Armoured Warfare. It has been a long time since I played. The operations don't appear to have changed too much. I mean, obviously there have been changes. There's a new tank dealer. There's a lot of new Israeli tanks in the game, one of which I'm driving at the moment. But at least in co-op battles, while there are new co-op battles and new ways of playing those co-op battles, everything did seem to feel comfortably familiar, despite the fact that I haven't actually played Armoured Warfare in probably about a year. It was just like getting back on a bike. You never forget how to do it. And then I jumped into PvP. Oh boy. Yeah, that was a bit rough. So I do plan to do an Armoured Warfare video, but it's not just going to be about co-op battles. It's going to address player versus player, random battles in Armoured Warfare as well. Whether that just be straightforward random battles or global operations or whatever. But I'm not ready to do that video yet, because on the few occasions where I did try the old random battles against other players, I died so quickly And I didn't know why, and that's an issue. Or it may be an issue, it may just be that I'm doing it wrong. But it may be that even though I was doing everything right, it didn't really make any difference. And if that's the case, there's something seriously wrong. At the moment, I don't know enough about Armoured Warfare to be able to say one way or the other whether or not that's the case. So further playtesting is definitely required. Also, I'd like to thank everybody from the Armoured Warfare community who reached out with offers of support and assistance when they heard that I was going to start playing Armoured Warfare again. And they range from people who were actually employed by Armoured Warfare and people who just play Armoured Warfare. However, I want to try to play the game with the minimal amount of safety net, because that's the experience that the vast majority of people are going to have when they install Armoured Warfare and give it a go for themselves. And yeah, I realise I have played Armoured Warfare before, but it was a long time ago, and I mostly just played the PvE, co-op operations. I didn't really play PvP that much. So I am very much a noob to PvP in Armoured Warfare, particularly since I haven't played in over a year. And I don't want to dilute the experience, if you like, by getting support and assistance that most people, if not all people, wouldn't have access to. I want to try to keep the experience as real as possible in order to be able to give an unbiased opinion. I mean, I could just push an Armoured Warfare video out tomorrow, but the PvP experience would be very short. It would be, here I am in a tier 10 main battle tank, penned from the front, and dead in 5 seconds. This game's shit. But that wouldn't really be fair. I mean, it wouldn't be fair to the game, it wouldn't be fair to you. It's entirely possible, in fact even entirely likely, that I was actually doing something horribly, horribly wrong at the time, and I just don't know what it was. On the other hand, it could be that top tier main battle tanks routinely get penned through the front of their tank by people firing ATGMs, rendering armour completely worthless in Armoured Warfare. But I don't know. I'm going to have to play the game more before I can come to a definite conclusion. So, short version, yes, there will be an Armoured Warfare video coming, but I think what I need to do, rather than jumping into tier 10 random battles, I need to start a little bit lower down and just figure out how it all is actually supposed to work first. So, that coming up at some point in the future. Speaking of new games that, well, you know, new, Armoured Warfare isn't exactly new, but speaking of new games that may be getting videos in the future, Far Cry New Dawn. Finished it. Took me 16 hours. That's it. Now this isn't... Well, it depends what your definition of a full price game is. I mean, people are used to paying £50 here in the UK or $60 in the US for a full price AAA game, which this definitely is not. Which is why they only charged... Well, the price here in the UK was £37.99 on Steam. So, about 2/3 the price of a full price game, and I still feel that I was overcharged. And not just because this game should have been DLC. This is not a standalone full price game, or even a 2/3 full price game. This is, while I hesitate to just go out and say this is a lazy asset flip, although there is some truth to that, because, I don't know, 80% of the in-game assets in Far Cry New Dawn are just recycled from Far Cry 5. In the majority of cases, all they've really done here is scatter some pink flowers over the landscape, knock a couple of trees over, and put some rust and masking tape on the weapons and vehicles, and bingo, Far Cry New Dawn. It's not that there are absolutely no new ideas here, although you could argue that you don't really come to a Far Cry game to see new ideas. They've got the formula, the open world exploration, take down outposts, liberate bases, blah blah blah, so on, and they've pretty much stuck to it for at least the last 4 Far Cry titles. But they have at least... I mean, the home base system I think is pretty good, and the expeditions are a nice addition. But that's pretty much it. Everything else that's new about Far Cry New Dawn is pretty terrible. The new bad guys, for example, they're called the Highwaymen, and they're basically the saviours from Walking Dead. And the leaders of the Highwaymen are basically Negan from The Walking Dead, except Negan with a personality and charisma bypass applied. It's going to be difficult to explain exactly what I mean here without venturing into spoiler territory, but suffice to say It's not that they didn't attempt to give a bit of depth and, well, character to these new characters, but the way they did it will have you smashing your keyboard in frustration. The new characters, almost without exception, are just diabolically bad, both good guys and bad guys. Rush, the guy upon which everybody is depending, never does anything other than get himself captured. I'm seriously beginning to doubt his credentials as a saviour of civilization, because the man is 100% useless and incompetent. There are a couple of new characters who could best be described as, well, they're alright. They're not bad, I suppose. But I don't think I'm making too bold a claim if I was to say that almost entirely without exception, every single good thing about Far Cry New Dawn comes from Far Cry 5. And there are good things in Far Cry New Dawn. I mean, I have enjoyed playing it on those occasions where I wasn't tearing what little hair I have left out in frustration. There were many occasions when playing Far Cry New Dawn where I was literally laughing out loud in amusement. But every time that happened, it was due to some kind of interaction with a character from Far Cry 5. Characters like Herc Drubman Jr. and Sharky Beaushaw in particular, who were both there in Far Cry 5, and they're here in Far Cry New Dawn as well. And they're probably the best things in it. And then, of course, the whole thing about what the hell happened to Joseph Seed and the Project Eden's Gate cultists, and it's all there. I mean, I said when I started playing this in last week's episode of Mingles with Jingles that I was really keen to see what exactly had happened to the Project Eden's Gate cult and their incredibly charismatic leader, Joseph Seed. And the game doesn't disappoint, but it does its level best to ruin it via the introduction of a new character. I can see a pattern emerging here. And here's the thing, Far Cry New Dawn, not far short of £40 on Steam. And okay, Far Cry 5, they're still charging full price for it on Steam. But if you shop around, you can get Far Cry 5 on console or PC for anything between £20 to £25. And I've got 53 hours played in Far Cry 5. That's how much content is in that game. This, New Dawn, 16 hours, done. Price, not far short of £40. This alleged new Far Cry game, which consists of 80% asset flip from Far Cry 5, doesn't even have as much new stuff in as the two Far Cry 5 DLCs, Lost on Mars and Hours of Darkness, and costs 4 times as much. Did I enjoy playing Far Cry New Dawn? Yes, with some reservations. Do I recommend Far Cry New Dawn? Hell no! Everything that's good about Far Cry New Dawn is already in Far Cry 5. And it's half the price, and it's got 3 times the content. Just play Far Cry 5. I said in last week's Mingles with Jingles when I first started trying out New Dawn that I kind of suspected that this should have been DLC, and I can now confirm that. This is quite frankly one of the laziest and most cynical cash grabs I have ever seen from a major publisher. So well done, Ubisoft. I mean, that's quite an accomplishment, because there is some serious competition for that title considering we live in a world where Electronic Arts exists. Will I be doing Far Cry New Dawn videos? Yes, I will, although I'm not turning this into a series the way I did with Far Cry 5. There will be a couple of Far Cry New Dawn videos, because there were moments while playing this game that were genuinely fantastic. And I'll be showing you those moments, but I'll also be showing you the moments that had me tearing my hair out in frustration, because there were plenty of those as well. So possibly 2, maybe 3 videos, but don't expect a series. And I realise that's probably not going to disappoint too many of you, because there are a lot of people out there who just don't like the Far Cry games, and that's absolutely fine. I do enjoy this type of game, which is probably why I was particularly disappointed in Far Cry New Dawn, because they really should have tried harder, and they should have tried cheaper. Anyway, moving on swiftly. March is shaping up to be, well, not a particularly busy month, but there's going to be a particularly busy week in March. I don't know if I mentioned this in an episode of Mingles with Jingles, but I've received an offer from a company called DriveTanks.com. In fact, I'm pretty sure I did mention this in an episode of Mingles with Jingles, but it's just all now been confirmed. DriveTanks.com, link in the video description, are located on a ranch in Texas out in the middle of nowhere, and they pretty much do exactly what it says on the box. You can drive tanks. However, because this is Texas, you don't just get to drive the tanks. Oh no, you get to fire the guns on the tanks as well. Looking at the list of tanks that they have, they've got a Sherman Easy-8, a Sherman Jumbo, a T-34-85, they've got a German armoured car, a half-track, sorry, a Kettentrad, a British FE-101 Scorpion light tank, there's a German Leopard 184, a Mark 6 Chieftain main battle tank, oh hell yes, an Abbott FE-433 self-propelled gun, and a BMP-1. You can't fire the guns on all of those, but you can on most of them. And that's not all. They also have, looking at the website, lots and lots of artillery, including the German 75mm Pak-40 anti-tank gun, the German 37mm anti-tank gun, and 25mm anti-tank gun, a Soviet 152mm howitzer, an American 105mm, you get the general idea here, yeah? The Japanese Type 38 75mm field gun, a whole bunch of mortars, and then of course we move on to the machine guns. There's the M134 minigun, the M250 caliber machine gun, they've got a Barrett M82 50 caliber rifle, the Vietnam era M9 flamethrower, oh yeah, M1919 light machine gun, M60, M249, M3 grease gun, M1 carbine, M1 Garand, I'm having a go at that, M4 carbine, German weapons, yep, they got an MG34 and an MG42, and a whole bunch of others. Then of course the high explosives, including shaped charges, hand grenades, so yeah, I'm going out there. The date hasn't been finalised yet, but we're looking at the 19th and 20th of March. And I'm basically going to be driving a bunch of tanks, shooting a bunch of stuff off, and filming it all, of course. The problem, although it's not hopefully going to be a problem, is that, like the day after I get back, I'm jumping back onto a plane to fly to St. Petersburg in Russia. I was just at the visa office last week to put my visa application in order to go and record my Captain Jingles voice lines for World of Warships. All of which means I might have to go so far as to actually take a week off YouTube, the week commencing Monday the 18th of March, because I'm pretty much going to be flying from one side of the world to the other and then back again over the course of that week. I'll try to see what I can do about getting some videos pre-uploaded and then scheduled for release for that week to cover my absence while I'm away. I mean, I've done this in the past, when I've gone away for Tiger Day, Tank Fest, things like that. But that's normally only for a couple of days, not an entire week. Well, I'll see what I can do. I mean, I don't want to leave you all hanging for an entire week, but it is an entire week. That's going to be a lot of extra work to get videos pre-uploaded before I disappear to Texas and then fly halfway around the world via England to go to Russia, all in the same week. Like I said, we'll see what I can do. Well, we're going to finish off this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles with something that I first started doing absolutely ages ago. Thought to myself, this is a really cool idea, I should do this every week in Mingles with Jingles. And everybody else thought, Jingles, that was a really cool idea. Can't wait to see this in next week's episode of Mingles with Jingles, and of course I completely forgot about it and never did it again. What are you talking about, Jingles? This week sees the return of On This Day in History. On this day, the 25th of February in the year 1336, 4,000 Lithuanian defenders of Pilani all killed themselves rather than be taken prisoner by the Germans. At the time, Lithuania was a pagan country. The neighbouring German principalities were all Christians, and so they decided that the only Christian thing to do in the circumstances was to spend the best part of 10 years looting everything that wasn't nailed down and a lot of things that were, and sticking sharp metal objects into any Lithuanian they could find who refused to accept Jesus Christ as their Lord and Saviour. Unsurprisingly, these crusades weren't particularly popular with the Lithuanians, particularly at the hill fort of Pilani, in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. So unpopular, in fact, that the Grand Duke himself decided that it was a far better idea that he stab his own wife and children with his sword, throw their bodies onto a fire, and then started murdering all of his guards and family retainers rather than let them be taken by the Germans. Somewhat surprisingly, you probably happened to be there, this was seen as a good example to his fellow Lithuanians, who all started killing each other and themselves as well. 4,000 of them in total. It's amazing the lengths that some people will go to just to not have to share a swimming pool with the Germans. Also on this day in the year 1797, and I absolutely love this one, the Battle of Fishguard. I had actually never heard of this until I went to do some research into what actually happened on the 25th of February. Or rather, I had heard of it, but I hadn't realised just how significant and funny it was. The Battle of Fishguard was the last time that the mainland of Britain was invaded by a hostile military force. This force, under the command of Colonel William Tate, an Irish American, consisted of 600 French regular troops, 800 French irregulars, 2 French frigates, 1 French corvette, and some kind of French fishing boat that had also been pressed into military service. So that's around 1,500 troops, 2 frigates and a corvette. After one battle, the Battle of Fishguard, although it barely deserves the title battle, this combined French and technically Irish-American force was defeated by 300 British Army reservists, 250 local militia, and 150 sailors. Basically a scratch force that was thrown together by Lord Cawdor, who wasn't even a soldier, he was the local member of Parliament. The battle resulted in the unconditional surrender of the French forces, resulting in the capture of 1,360 Frenchmen, 1 frigate, 1 corvette, and 1 Irish American. So the lesson here is if you're going to invade mainland Britain, take more than 1,500 troops, and don't be French. Also on this day, in the year 1932, Adolf Hitler became a German citizen by naturalization, which allowed him to run in the 1932 elections for Reich's president. He lost the election, by the way, to the First World War hero Paul von Hindenburg. However, Hindenburg's government wasn't strong enough to form a majority, and so Hindenburg undertook the decision, possibly the worst political decision anybody ever made during the entirety of the 20th century, to offer that Hitler fellow the post of Chancellor instead. And the rest is history. On this day, 1 year later, in 1933, the USS Ranger was launched, the first US Navy ship to be designed from the bottom up as an aircraft carrier, rather than just be a cancelled battlecruiser that had had a flight deck slapped onto the top of the superstructure halfway through construction. On this day in 1945, Turkey, perhaps deciding that they'd quite like to be on the winning side during the World War for once, declared war on Germany. Oh well, better late than never. On this day in 1956, in a speech entitled On the Cult of Personality and Its Consequences, Nikita Khrushchev, the Premier of the Soviet Union, said what basically amounted to, "So, that Stalin guy, he was a bit of an arsehole." On this day in 1991, the Warsaw Pact was formally abolished, which left a whole bunch of Eastern European countries free, penniless, and with some seriously ugly architecture. Today also sees the birthday of George Harrison of the Beatles, and also sees the birthday of Sean Astin, a pretty cool American actor who's unfortunately best known for his portrayal of a short fat hobbit who had a suspicious man crush on Elijah Wood. And finally, the 25th of February is celebrated today in Georgia, that's the country, not the Southern American state, as Soviet Occupation Day. Although celebrated is probably a bit too strong. I think remembered. Yeah, remembered is about right. And that's it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. Hope you enjoyed it, and as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.